Okay. So we are now at our final panel of the day. And the topic is one that's particularly pertinent to the luxury industry, but also important to many industries as it relates to the subject of corporate social responsibility. To lead this discussion, it's our pleasure to welcome Burak Cakmak, the Dean of Fashion at the Parsons School of Design at the New School. Mr. Cakmak is joined by Audrey Fauroux, a partner at WeiserMazars, Guillaume Cunff, president of Nespresso USA, and Michaut, academic director of the Advanced Management Program in Fashion and Luxury at HEC Paris, and Fabien Moreau, co-founder of Forward. Please join me in welcoming our panel.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm just going to quickly ask you to open your eyes and keep it open for the next 30 minutes. And we promise that we're going to give you the best experience of the day. I hope you'll help me, the panelists. That's great. So if we think about the topic of sustainability and luxury, the immediate thoughts that come to mind is it a contradiction or is it something complementary? So thinking through those challenges, I think we are already questioning, are the luxury brands sustainable or not? If you look specifically at fashion, you might already know that it is publicized widely that it is the second most polluting industry in the world after oil and gas. So with these, which includes of course luxury products as well. So it can be for the brands an effort to do some risk mitigation, or it can be an effort to address some opportunities when it comes to tying sustainability approaches into their day-to-day business. So if you're thinking if this is a potential risk and how we're going to address it, we have seen many issues in the media about using Chinese labor in Italy, damaging the ecosystem because of the animal hides that are used, impacts on biodiversity, but also the concept that luxury products can be considered superfluous and not needed. On the other hand, it has a lot of positive values that creates an opportunity to tell a different story. So this includes the few words that we heard today, including that it's timeless products, it represents quality, it actually helps create emotional connection. So through that connection, you want to keep that product with you, but also you're supporting the craftsmanship all around the world. So maybe there's an opportunity to redesign consumerism by using behavioral economics. But I'm not going to try to answer that and maybe start with simpler questions that I'm going to open up to our panelists. So I would like to make a statement and want to see your reaction to it. Sustainability is about how you make your money and not what you do with it. So do you just want to go around and respond to it, please? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's very much the case today. Like when we look at luxury brands before, they were kind of, okay, we need to do something good. Let's do our year, see I did well with it, and potentially at the end of the year, what's the sensibility about doing something positive. Now it's a total game change where it's built at the very core of the way those companies do business, and it's really something that is thought through completely, what changed from what you do with your money to how you make money. And I think that it starts to show proven success, that it's everyone wins at the end.
Great, thank you. Guillaume, what do you think?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I think this is the only way to grow a business today. So it's not how we make money. It's the only way to make money on a long run. For Nespresso, it's just the only way to be sustainable as a business. We are promising to, I guess I have few customers in this room. I hope. But we are promising a unique quality and a unique taste profile that is coming from very remote area in the world. And we are committed to you on a very long run. So if we are not making our supply chain from A to Z, from the coffee tree to the cup and from the to the end using of the capsules, there is no way we will be sustainable on the long run if the supply chain is itself not sustainable, and it's starting with farmers. So this is why we decided to work with thousands of farmers in the world, direct connected to Nespresso, and we are working with these people on a daily basis just to be sustainable as a business.
That's great. Thank you. Audrey?
Yeah, no, I think it's right. There's been, over the past 15 years, a significant evolution in the sustainability practices for luxury companies. And this shift has really been mainly driven by consumers' demand. There was a 2014 global study that reported that 55% of consumers are willing to pay more for products and services coming from companies that are really committed for positive social and environmental impact. And that growth is really mainly driven by millennials. And I think someone this morning, Alain Bernard, mentioned that by 2020, millennials will represent 30% of the retail sales in the US. So that's a clear business opportunity for companies. And the shift really, for the past 15 years is really going way beyond philanthropy. We started to see philanthropy initiatives years ago. Now it's way beyond that, and even way beyond CSR, really towards creating share value for all the key stakeholders, not only the investors, but also the employees and the community and society.
That's great. And just briefly, maybe in my role, my 100% of my customers are millennials, and I was quite pleasantly surprised when I joined the school last semester. The first question came up from majority of them was how to become a designer that's understanding what sustainability means. So if you haven't done so, I think this is quite a nice warning to think about the future customers and what they're expecting from you. But maybe I can ask you as well, Anne.
Yes, well, quickly, because being in a school as well, I see it from further away, but the idea is I think I see today that in the luxury sector, the idea of how do you produce, where do you invest, who is going to produce, from what material, etc., is becoming, the interest in it is becoming a standard of the sector. So I would say from a community perspective, everybody's looking at it more and more, and it becomes a topic of increased interest.
That's great. So another question to the whole panel. How do consumers know when a brand isn't demonstrating a genuine effort to act sustainably in their business practices? Who would like to start?
I've been global CMO before coming here in New York to run this business, so I've met with a lot of customers, went in focus groups. It's unbelievable how people are educated about our brand. They are all CMOs, and they have deep understanding, they have strong beliefs, and they have opinions. So they understand everything. And on top of that, coming back to my first comment, they are educated on coffee. So if we screw up on the product itself, it's quite visible. Yeah. So I think we better be transparent and be aware that they get it.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah, I agree. Especially the young consumers are much more educated on sustainability today. And so if really the companies want to meet their expectations, they need to demonstrate genuine efforts on sustainability. And I think that I have maybe 3 thoughts on this. The first one, I think it's critical that the sustainability initiative is coming from the leadership, from the CEO and the senior executives in the organization, of course in collaboration with the sustainability department. Second thing, I think it's important that the sustainability initiatives relate to the core business operations. So, because all companies want to avoid being suspected or accused of greenwashing. And 3, maybe implementing a transparent measurement and reporting on, what are your sustainability targets, and the action you implement to meet those targets is critical to engage with all the key stakeholders. And I think a good example also of engagement of key stakeholders and communities reaching out to independent organizations for the certification and independent levels. For example, Chopard worked with independent mines in South America that provides fair mined gold. So that's a level that guarantees that the gold is coming from a responsible artisan, small-scale mining organization.
That's great. Fabien?
So I think there's 2 ways to spot if a brand is doing the right way. The first way is the personal experience. as a customer, whether when you experience the product or the service, you can kind of get a sense if the company is doing something right or not, whether it's excessive packaging or whatever. But what's come to be very interesting and important, obviously, over the past years is the power of social media. And we know that the new consumer is very active in that sense. He will fight, she will fight for justice, and they use their smartphones as their new weapons. And we know that a company that is doing wrong is under the utmost transparency needs and scrutiny, and will be flagged very quickly for whatever they do that is not necessarily right. So I think we live in this day and age, and it's not going to change where we can't really hide anything that is not the right and the proper business practice.
Yeah, fully agree. Maybe I think so. Thank you. Fully agree. I think today consumers are definitely very much informed, just as much as it is informed about the products themselves. They're very much informed about the way they're made, so they take a lot of information online, offline as well. And what's more, I think what's interesting with the luxury sector, well, interesting and dangerous at the same time, is because most of your brands are very visible. And in fact, of course, we want them to be very visible, but very visible means it's two sides, right? There is the pro of being very visible. You see the good things, but also you're at risk in terms of activists seeing you and potentially taking you as a target. As you say, as you just mentioned in introduction, the fashion sector is not the least, polluting one. And clearly, I think there is an expectation of luxury to be exemplary. It's a business of perfection. It should be perfection in everything, including, of course, sustainability. And I think from that point of view, luxury brands really have a game to play, to be there, to be exemplary also in that dimension, because they are so visible. And we see that they have the possibility to take the leadership. All the actions that have been taken in the past by luxury brands, they tend to be much more followed than other ones. So if we see things like the Responsible Jewelry Council, for instance, there might be luxury brands that are at the origin, and then it's the whole sector that is following up. And I think the luxury sector has the power to do that, and probably it's an interesting direction.
Yeah, and maybe I can add one more thing around the consumer engagement, especially social media. It's been quite interesting to see in the past 5 years how information is disseminated about your brand by other channels. So even if you're not talking about it and you're not genuine, there are many others that are able to tell your story in a very clever way to raise awareness and really push the brands in taking action. So we've seen it at mass market, but we've also seen it at luxury. And all of it is on YouTube, and there are microsites. So it's so easy to reach out to the wider consumer that it's becoming impossible to hide from the realities of what happens day to day in our businesses. So another question for everyone. What are some of the examples of very successful and not so successful partnerships and sustainability efforts that you or audiences have paid attention to? Florian, do you want to?
One example I think I could quote from the past 6 months, I think that Alexander Wang, for example, had a strong impact with his Do Something campaign, getting 38 artists on board to create awareness and raise funds for this. It's really something that I think within our kind of community of luxury and fashion that has had a lot of impact. Also, I think a group like Caring has been doing some interesting things in the past. Clearly defining what they stand for, getting on board in an early stage, understanding what consistency is all about, creating new roles for that. I think the role of Anne-Claire Deveux, for CSO is something that can have some brainchilds, and so I think those are two examples personally that have been interesting.
Well, when it comes to partnership, I think it's a very important idea to discuss, because we realized over the past years that nothing is possible without partners. We would not be able to do anything alone, so we have to admit that. Now at Nespresso we started with the Rainforest Alliance, which is a New York-based non-profit, and we extended partnership to many NGOs, So now working with Fairtrade International, Fairtrade USA, IUCN, Techno, so you name it, 30 around. Just to give you an example, I don't know if it's never 100% successful. So one of the toughest projects we are running right now with TechnoServe is trying to bring back coffee to life in South Sudan. And I can tell you it's a bumpy road.
That's complicated.
But when you manage to get the first coffee bags out of this country, re-exported as a first commodity since the war, I don't want to say ended, but at least we managed to get this coffee back and we launched this coffee, brought it to the market. It's a success, but every time we have a success, we create new challenges.
Yeah.
And I have so many examples where it's a school of humility. You have good success, and the day after you create a new issue that you have to fix with a new opportunity. So it's a long journey, but definitely partnership has been the key. If we look forward, I think beyond partnership, it's not only non-profit. I think the next era will be about leveraging and getting more impact. So I firmly believe that we are entering in a phase where impact investment will be the key word beyond partnering with non-profit. So I used to say, we used to learn working with NGOs and non-profit. Now we need to have bankers and private equity in the same room. That's the challenge we have, and we're going to take it.
Sounds great. And in some of the countries you work, you may need a new headcount called chaos manager, potentially.
Yeah.
Two examples, maybe. The first one, I agree with Fabien. I think that Herring is a great example because it's an example of historical, traditional luxury company that started with philanthropic activities and supporting several non-profit organizations in the early 2000s, and really shifted toward more shared value. And we saw that a few years ago, the chairman of the group stated that sustainable business is smart business. Very much what you said earlier. And they started to implement several initiatives like partnering with Warn Again, working on new technology to recycle end-of-use textile for the industry, but also implemented innovative tools like the environmental P&L to measure the environmental footprint, but also use this tool to set targets and continue to improve. And they also use this to attract and retain talent, which I think also is a significant component of the need for sustainability. The second example that I like is Michaut. Michaut is who I think you know very well. Michaut is a very young luxury fashion brand that was really created for the purpose of sustainability. The founders really met with incredible artisans in developing countries and wanted to support those communities and through luxury. And they continue to work with non-profit organizations who really focus on the training of those artisans, but also not only for their handcraft, but also for the development of their business and their community. And they work also on sourcing of ethical sourcing of cashmere.
That's great.
So I think it's great to see also those young designers because sustainability is really part of their DNA, and I think it's interesting to see this as also maybe a competition for more traditional luxury companies.
Yeah. Thank you. And do you have any additional?
I think
it's all covered.
I like your example. Actually, there are many other small entities like this that start with interesting raw materials, interesting way to produce, and I think it's very rich for the luxury industry. At the end of the day, we're all looking for new materials, exclusivity in materials, exclusivity in know-how, and in fact, I think sustainability can be a great way to find new things, to find new ideas, to find new creations also. We see that there are brands like Osklen as well that work with institutes that develop new materials of high quality, nevertheless made in a sustainable way. So there are lots of initiatives in that direction.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe we can ask a couple questions to the audience. So the first one is going to be, is your company actively engaged in CSR efforts? If we can put that up. Ooh.
We need more yes.
Yes, I would love to see 100% there, but. Okay, I think it looks like, 65%. So it looks like there's some room for improvement here, but glad to hear that it's at least above 50%. Second question, how important is it to you that the products you buy have been sourced in a sustainable way? Is it very important, or not important? Just your personal opinion. Interesting. So 10% actually doesn't care in the room, so that's good to know as well. But there's obviously some relevance. We can see the majority cares about it. So in some ways, we are showing the trend, and I can guarantee you that if we did it in the school, it would be 100%. And then maybe the last question to you, would you be more inclined to purchase products if you knew they have been sustainably sourced? So So hopefully that's an indication that at least if we are telling the story, there's a big opportunity to tap into the consumer, especially at the luxury segment where price is not the same equation as mass market. So some of these values can easily be embedded into the product, and also it can be communicated to really engage a customer. So in some ways, even you yourself is demonstrating that. So I will go into a few specific questions. I can start with Fabien. So with your experience in the world of music and advertising, you've now established a successful agency that's making strategic connections between celebrities and brands. So what makes a particular celebrity pair well with a particular brand, and especially if there's a role of CSR sustainability in this engagement?
So I'm going to try to give you some tips and sharing of experience, as I've been working for a few years on that, and the game has changed dramatically over the past years. Basically, with our luxury clients, we used to look for what I would call a single relevance. Is basically what do our consumers and target consumers care about as for a celebrity? We have a CSR approach. Let's try to align that celebrity with our initiative. Now what we're looking for is kind of a double relevance. What I mean by that is that those celebrities are brands in themselves, and they're brands with a modern approach, so they have themselves a lot of times something that they believe in, that they fight for, whether it's education, whether it's the environment, whether it's empowering women. So the way we work this now, and the practice is pretty much work backwards. We need to find a celebrity that makes sense for the brands about who they are and their products, but also makes sense about trying to match what they're known about, caring about on a CSR standpoint, and what the brand does care about. So that's how a lot of time we're gonna look at celebrities of like that have this in their actions and have already had an involvement with this, and see when we have that pool of artists to say which are the ones that actually, besides the CSR approach, match the most with the brand. So that's changing a lot. Another thing I want to say is that we switched from an environment where years back I would approach a celebrity and they'd be, oh great, something, about a charity, or I'm doing, with a luxury brand, let's do it. Now they get bombarded with those requests. Every month they have opportunity, and this, presented to them, and they see it more and more as a disguised endorsement. We want to work with such and such. We don't want to pay him or her $1 million. Let's say it's for a good cause, and try to get her on board. So you need to come up with solid arguments to get them on board. It's a big challenge. If I could give 3 very quickly, I would say 1, try to challenge the celebrity and the artist into expressing themselves creatively in something they've never done before. I got to do for Cartier's Love Collection, for Action for Hunger, to bring Marion Cotillard on board to sing and not to act. Last year we did Rihanna and Fendi. I didn't ask her for a song, but she was very excited to reinvent the baguette bag from Fendi. So try to give them the opportunity to do that. Second, make sure that everyone who works with the celebrity is taken care of in terms of financially, the same way that if it was a normal project and campaign, which means celebrity shouldn't pay it, but a manager and all this, whoever is going to make time will do that. And third, be open to the idea of the raise you're going to fund, or not necessarily for your foundation as a brand or this, but potentially for the one of the celebrity. Let's do something great together. It's good for us. We're going to raise money, but this is for your foundation. So these are 3 thoughts I wanted to share with you that kind of like help change the game when you approach someone of a, of a strong reputation and following to get on board with whatever mission you're working on.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. So another question for Guillaume, I guess, about Nespresso's efforts. So according to your sustainability mission, Nespresso is committed to ensuring sustainability throughout its operations, seeking to create shared value, positive impact for farmers, consumers, and society at large, while caring for the environment. So could you speak about what this model looks like, how value is created for your stakeholders?
So, as I told you at the beginning, we're committed to deliver day after day for the next 50 years amazing coffee quality, but also unique taste. And we are finding this taste all around the planet in very remote areas. And of course, we realized years ago that we had to make this farming and farmers sustainable if we wanted it to be sustainable. So we started 2003, going farm by farm. Now we have 74,000 farmers in the program in 12 countries. We are paying a higher price. We're paying about 30-40% above the market price, also because it's part of the equation. And we are training these farmers and trying to improve and make them more sustainable. The best reward for us is 90% of these farmers are still in the program after all these years, which proves to work pretty well. But we want also to be consistent in the whole value chain, because I'm sure many people in this room were listening to my stories on coffee, asking, but what about the capsules? Because we were ready to hear about the coffee, but what do we do on the capsules? So we started also now 8 years ago to build our own capabilities so that we were able to be consistent from the tree to the cup and even after. If we focus on the US, for people living in the US now, we try to make your life easier, so we just signed a partnership with UPS. You can drop your capsules anytime in a UPS truck, in a UPS locations, and we will invest much more on these aspects so that, one, we'll be consistent all along the value chain. Second, you will be keen to hear what we have to say on coffee, because you're reassured on the fact that we're taking care of everything, including the end of life or new life of your capsules.
That's great, thank you. So another question for Audrey. So how do you see luxury companies implementing sustainability? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing?
So what we see is that for luxury companies, I think that supply chain needs to be really at the heart of the sustainability strategy for companies. Many companies over the past few years have been really working on the environmental aspects of the supply chain. But I really believe that today's challenge is more on the social and human rights aspects of the supply chain. And human rights, when you talk about luxury companies this morning, it was really interesting actually to hear about, from the heritage brand talking about emotional, appeal and love, and modern brand talking about the trust, with our customers. Well, you cannot take risk with human rights when you're a luxury company. So that might be one of the most important 21st century risk and one of the most pressing reputational consideration for high-end brand. And actually there's been significant evolution also in the regulations over the past few years. Since 2011, many global companies and even governments backed a global standard, the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And since then, we've seen law and regulations expanding. We had the California Transparency in Supply Chain Act that became effective in 2012. And since then, the UK Modern Slavery Act in 2015. And last week, actually in France, the National Assembly adopted a law proposal on companies' duty care, the devoir de vigilance. So that's also a significant consideration for companies to implement sustainability practices and human rights due diligences. Now, all this is pretty new, and it's very complex to implement, especially in modern supply chain environments that are very complex and global. So there are few tools that start to become available, and Mazars developed a very practical tool with a Shift, an independent organization, and it's really a framework that proposes companies to prioritize, meaning to really identifying what are the salient issues in your organization relating to human rights. Where does your supply chain poses the greatest risk and the most severe impact on individuals? And once you identify those salient issues, you prioritize your action on addressing those risks specifically. So we have already 6 companies who have started to implement this framework since last year. And actually got the support also from the investment community. We had support from more than 80 investors representing more than $5 trillion of assets under management. So that's encouraging signs from the investing community as well.
That's great, thank you. I mean, I agree that social side is a critical element and supply chain has always been a concern, but more and more, I just want to remind also internally, the ethics bit in the company all the way to the board level is still on the agenda. And with what's happening around the world, I think that will still be quite relevant at the same time, in addition to environmental issues. So the last question, I know we are nearly out of time, is to Anne. You co-authored a paper called Is Luxury Compatible with Sustainability? Luxury Consumers' Viewpoint, in which you argue that luxury buyers have ambivalent attitudes such that they consider luxury and sustainability contradictory, especially with regard to the social economic harmony facet of sustainable development. So how do you explain that?
So basically, we've done a study at WeiserMazars where we looked in 6 different countries. We asked 500 consumers per country. So we had the US, Brazil, France, Germany, and Japan and China. So we asked in different regions of the world. And we asked consumers to what was their standpoint on sustainability and in their luxury consumption. In fact, so we see that consumers perceive a contradiction between the two. And what we were interested in is knowing why do they perceive this contradiction, because having a French background, I tend to think that in fact there is, to me at first, no contradiction, because I believe luxury are made with, sort of care that we take care of the people making them, we take care of the raw material, we think about durability of our products, etc., etc. So what's interesting is to see that in the global vision of consumers, first of all, there is a lot of homogeneity. It's not very surprising, because basically what it says is that our luxury consumers are homogeneous in the world with respect to that, like they are with respect to other elements. But what's interesting is to see, so what drives this contradiction? First, there is indeed the idea that luxury is not based on social equity, and when we think about it, clearly it is not the case, whereas it should be one of the basics of sustainability. So clearly here we have a contradiction, and consumers see it, and it's clear that we cannot make that vanish. However, what's interesting is that they also perceive, in fact, that one of the drivers of contradiction has more to do with, so sorry about the term, but they mentioned the superficiality. So it doesn't mean that they associate luxury to superficiality, but the superficial dimension drives their contradiction, their perceived contradiction. And it's pretty interesting because in fact it means that they see the excess and probably glamour and everything to be contradictory with sustainability. But what it means as well is that they don't see any desire, any real appeal in sustainability. And maybe it says something about the way sustainability has been framed in our world until now. It's not framed as something desirable, which is pretty contradictory in itself. And it should be, maybe luxury is a sector that has the potential to turn around that perception that, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, we have the impression that in consumption, sustainability is something boring, which is totally amazing, in fact, because it shouldn't be the case. So in fact, this is the explanation around the contradiction. But in fact, what's interesting is that our consumers are more indifferent to sustainability when they purchase luxury. So I don't know how it would be if I ask you the question, but when we ask our consumers, so do you care about sustainability when you purchase luxury? Only 1/3 told us, yes, we do care. So like 30%, irrelevant of the country where we asked. And probably, maybe even within this 30%, maybe some of them lied, because we know very much that this is the kind of question where we have a very high yes-saying bias. So next to this, we try to understand whether this is really indifference. And what's interesting is that, indeed, we see that, well, they don't really care, but what we ask them afterwards is, okay, what if we ask you the following question, and we had 2 or 3 questions like this. Given the price of luxury, it would be shocking if there would not be sustainable brands, or luxury brands should be exemplary with respect to sustainable development. So this is the answer in France. We also ask the same question in China. Figures are exactly the same, except that on the second question is 75. And actually, here we asked the question on a 10-point scale, and I considered in here only the people that answered a 10 on a 10-point scale. So what it says, actually would be funny to ask here, whether we could have this answer. But what it says actually is that sustainability is not something that customers are asking for when they purchase a luxury good. But in fact, they don't ask for it because they expect brands to take care of it without having to ask for it. And just to come back to a bit of a conceptual framework around this, it's typically what we would call today an implicit need. So just to give you a very blunt example, if you go to purchase a computer today, I'm sure you're not asking for a color screen. However, if you open your computer and it's black and white, you're not going to be happy. That's typically what I call an implicit need. So you're not asking for it, you're never expressing the need. But if it's not there, you're pretty unsatisfied, to say the least. And I think that's what has happened to sustainability today for luxury businesses. Consumers are not going to ask for it, but if we are not offering it, it is a problem.
Great.
So that's the message of the study that we did.
Okay, that's great. Let's, I guess, wrap up with this final note. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I think at the cocktails we can answer.